depositions and mediations and meeting and understanding expert testimony, those sorts of things. And at the very end of the day, if things cannot be resolved, that means we go to trial. And really, only about 5% of all civil cases end up in a jury trial. So it is a very small percentage, but for that percentage, that's where all the, I think mostly from a law student perspective, that's where you see yourself in trial. But what our fellowship tries to do is to teach you that before you get to trial, there are a lot of things that have to be done, a lot of things you have to know about your case before you get to go and put your case on in front of a jury. So that's what it means to be a plaintiff's lawyer in town, and we are up against the defense bar, and the defense does the very opposite of what we do, which is they defend people who allegedly injure or wrong other people. And my personal background is that I started out, when I graduated from law school, I started out representing insurance companies and tortfeasors. And I did that for 5 years, and I did that because when I graduated, the economic climate looked much like it looks now, and I went for a job interview, and they said, we do insurance defense, and I said to myself, I have no idea what that is, and we didn't really have the benefit of the internet, so I took my chances and started out doing that work. Ultimately, I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be on the other side of the V, so to speak, on the other side of the fence. But that was a very good training ground for me, because it was the kind of firm where you got a bunch of cases and they said, go out, litigate. And so I'm a first-year lawyer, I'm taking depositions, I'm in arbitration, I'm going to mediation, I'm preparing for trial. And so that's a really good training ground. So as young lawyers, the real goal should be to get as much experience out there as you can. Wherever you are, you're going to learn something from the job you have. So that's how I started out, and then ultimately I went to the other side and I worked for a very large plaintiffs personal injury firm in the city, and I did that for another 4 years. And then 4 years ago I opened up my own firm, but still doing the same sort of work. So it's a process. The first job you had out of law school these days is not going to be your last job anymore. Maybe, but you don't see it happening. So what we're trying to impart to law students, because I talk to law students all the time, and I get a lot of questions about how do you know what the right firm is, or how do you know what you want to do, or how do you get to where you want when there aren't any jobs? And those questions are hard to answer, but it's helpful in law school to not just go to classes. You have to do other things to expose yourself to what it's like to really practice law. Participate in clinics, civil clinics, criminal clinics, where you're getting to interact with real clients. Do mock trial or moot court, and try that on for size. Get experiences while you're in law school, and also meet some real lawyers. Ask them questions. When you meet a lawyer in passing at a cocktail party, or your dad's friend's uncle, whoever it is, get their card, call them up. Say, hey, we met at a party and I wanted to take 10 minutes of your time to ask you some questions. I guarantee you, every lawyer you call will be willing to sit down and meet with you and answer your questions. Because we love to talk. We love to talk about our business. Ourselves. And, we also remember what it's, most of us remember what it's like to be a law student. And, it's a hard time. So take advantage of those opportunities, because they can be very helpful for you. Because now, the way you get jobs, especially, I just spoke on a panel at Santa Clara a couple weeks ago, and the topic was how to get a non-OCI job, right? So not the big fancy jobs, the big fancy firms, how to get a regular job. And, to get a big corporate job or a summer clerkship like that, where you're going out on the yacht or whatever it is they entice kids with, they have a process for that, right? They have a whole... It's not an accident. Right, it's a process. For everything else, to be a plaintiff's lawyer, there has been no process. And so it's very difficult for law students to figure out how to get these jobs. And one of the reasons why we developed this program and started coming to law schools to speak to you about SFTLA is because we would get student members who would say to us, we didn't even know how to break into this business. You guys don't advertise in the Recorder, we don't see you on campus, you're not at OCI. How do we get jobs at your plaintiff's law firms? And so that's why we're here, to tell you that there's another side to it. right? There's another side to doing defense work or corporate work or IP or patent, and it is to do civil trial work, which is a remarkably rewarding profession. It can be tiring, and it requires a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, and a lot of fight. You know, you are advocates for people who by and large cannot advocate for themselves, so your job is really important and it's needed. So it's our hope that law students will be encouraged to kind of join our ranks and participate in this kind of law, because I think it's something that is worthwhile and it's another alternative to big law.
It's also a kind of an alternative, in a way, to classic public interest. I came to law school because I wanted to enact social change. If I hadn't been a lawyer, I would be either a journalist or an activist of some sort. I loved to write, and I liked to fight, and I wanted to stick up for victims of bullies. And I would have rather worked at Starbucks than worked at a big firm in downtown San Francisco. So when I came, I graduated from UC Santa Cruz, right, kooky, crazy hippie, and I got into Stanford Law School, and like many of my spoiled brat classmates, you know, I knew that there were 3 Skadden fellowships, and I would get one of them. And first I'd go clerk for a federal judge, and then I'd get to Skadden, and then I'd go work for LDF for the rest of my life and write Harvard Law Review articles. And to my great surprise, none of those things happened. I ended up being a legal research attorney for the San Francisco Superior Court at the recommendation of a judge who's a friend, which was a fantastic opportunity and not something Stanford students did because they're too fancy. That exposed me to trial work on a day-to-day basis and to the San Francisco bar. And I learned so much watching lawyers, and I think I learned as much from the bad lawyers as I did from the good lawyers, and I learned a lot about judging. I was experimenting during law school with criminal defense work, capital appeals, and in fact my first supervisor, Andy Love, was a Golden Gate graduate, and he's one of the smartest lawyers I've ever worked with. I was very interested in plaintiffs' employment discrimination, and my first job after my legal research attorney job was with a local law firm called then Lawless, Horowitz and Lawless, which was run by 2 sisters, Therese and Barbara Lawless, who gave me a wonderful sort of mentorship. And again, a little bit like Shaana's experience, I was sort of thrown into the deep end and was writing 3 briefs a week. It was fascinating, and I learned a lot about plaintiff's work and how difficult it is. I didn't want to be an insurance lawyer when I grew up. I didn't know what an insurance lawyer was, and it sounded incredibly boring. But after my year at the Lawless sisters, I was recruited by this firm through a headhunter, and what was explained to me was right side insurance work, and I thought, wow, that sounds fun. Insurance companies are really bad. And so in 1999, I joined the firm, and I've been there ever since. Mostly we represent disabled insureds, people who have purchased or gotten as a benefit of employment disability insurance, who become disabled and can no longer work, and their insurance company says that they can perform a sedentary occupation and cuts their benefits off, often with grave results for the individual who can't pay their bills and for their families. It's incredibly rewarding work. I love my job. One of the things that I think law students don't do enough is ask people if they love their jobs. Don't work for people that don't love their jobs. Love your job. You're going to be terrible at a job if you're not good at it. And so it's really important that I just hate to see the line of lemmings that go off to big firms, because you can see it. You can see 95% of them are going to be miserable, and they're going to get addicted to the salary, and they're going to get golden handcuffs, and they're not going to be able to leave because they have their BMW payments to make, and they're miserable. And when you see the fellows that come through this fellowship, and you see the people that we work with who are our colleagues, These are people who are by and large extremely satisfied with their work. They're stressed out, they drink too much, they're exhausted.
We're on YouTube.
But these are people who are passionate about going to work every day. I know I am, and I feel incredibly lucky that I stumbled into it. And I'm also a little bit resentful that somebody didn't come to Stanford and say, look what we do, this is really fun. You know, instead we had OCI and the two scadens, and that was it. That's what I thought the alternatives were.
The other thing law students always think, they think of somehow plaintiff's work is nonprofit work, like Rebecca mentioned, and it's not. And the idea, and law students have economic realities right now, right? You all are graduating with student loan debt that boggles my mind. So we appreciate how expensive law school is now, and you are worried about how do I pay my student loans if I go into this type of work. What we do is we get compensated for our time. This is not a non-profit endeavor or area of law. So when you start out in plaintiff's work, the salaries are not commensurate with what you get at a big firm, but over time, certainly it can be a very, it's a profession where you can earn a very respectable living and live much like your compatriots at the big firms. But it does require you to have an investment in plaintiff's work for a period of time before you can see those sorts of benefits to it. But it is an area of law where you can make money. So I don't want to convey that we don't work for free, and a lot of times people. The other thing law students think about plaintiff's work sometimes is, we hear a lot of disparaging remarks, especially about what I do. People who are personal injury lawyers, they chase ambulances, or you represent people who aren't hurt, or there's frivolous lawsuits, all that kind of stuff, and those are things you hear out of jury's mouths as well. It's very disheartening because it is, in a lot of respects, a very noble pursuit to help people who can't help themselves. My clients come to me from all walks of life. I have clients who are immigrants who don't speak English, who have been victims of sexual assault or elder abuse at the hands of big, giant nursing home corporations. I have clients who are in regular car accidents, but the insurance company says, we don't believe you were hurt, even though you went to the doctor. We're not going to pay you. And so these are people who can't fight for themselves. And so without us, without what we do, then they have no recourse. The same thing is true with all these specialties that I mentioned, including consumer class action law. Consumer class action attorneys, they fight the fight against corporations to stop corporations from unduly taking advantage of the public. And without the threat of litigation, without trial courts, without trial lawyers, those people, those corporations, those individuals, they go unchecked. And so it's sort of like we're the gatekeepers for justice. That's how we view it. And that might be a little bit, I don't know.
I'm a true believer.
Excessive.
I drink the Kool-Aid.
Well, we are true believers. Our jobs are hard, and it's hard to be a trial lawyer. I don't make any, I don't sugarcoat it. When people come to work for me, I tell them, you're going to work a lot, you're going to work hard. Because I expect law students who work for me and young lawyers who work for me to actually not just do the work, but to have empathy for the people we represent. Because as lawyers, we are not, sometimes people graduate from law school and they're like, well, I'm a lawyer, okay? And they think, for some reason, you got a JD, you're fancy pants now, okay? No one can touch you, you can behave any way you want. And that's not true, I don't think. I mean, you can behave any way you want, but when you're representing people, it's really important that you understand that you are there to serve them. We are in a service profession, by and large. I don't consider myself any different than the lady who does my hair or the person who serves me a cup of coffee in the morning, because I am there to serve my clients. That's why I exist. Okay? They don't exist to serve me. It's the other way around. And that is the sort of attitude that I think it's really important to represent clients, because unless you have respect for your clients and for what they've gone through, there's no way you can actually be a zealous advocate for your client. So I really encourage law students as they go through law school to understand and learn the rules of professional conduct. Understand